They're a really intelligent team, really smart. They have really smart players, Jimmy, Bam, Kyle, who can read the moment and read the game, and they can just kind of morph in some different zone, if that make any sense. And just as a team, they know how to not how, like what they want to give up or whatever. They're really intelligent from the coach to the players, and that's why the zone is so effective, not just against us, it's against the whole playoffs, but sometimes we get a good look, sometimes we don't, but I think that's even in a regular man-to-man. Sometimes you get a good shot, sometimes you don't.
Like I've always said, I got so much faith in them. I can't win without them. I've tried that before in other places where I just think I could do it. Nah, that's not the answer. Here, we understand that I need those guys, and I hope those guys need me a little bit too. But it's like, it's perfect basketball. We love playing for and with one another. If you open, I'm passing it.
Vinnie Goodwill, who's in Miami. What's up, man? Welcome to Brother from Another. Always good to have you. And I got something I want to ask you, but before I get to that, I just thought of this as I was listening to that Jimmy Butler clip again. I know you covered him at his first NBA stop in Chicago, and he comes off as so humble now. Was he like that then? Was he like that with the Bulls, or was it just the opposite? Tell me the Jimmy Butler you see now and the Jimmy Butler you knew when you covered him.
It's the same guy. You know what I mean? Like by the time I get to Chicago's in 2014-15, which was the Jimmy Butler breakout year. That was his first All-Star year. That was the year where he won Most Improved Player. So Jimmy's thing with the media then was he was upset that they didn't treat him like the All-Star that he'd become. That the media treated him like, oh, remember Jimmy Butler that didn't used to play. Like there's a certain way that All-Stars are treated by the media. You know what I mean? And if you're holding that player to the first impression, to the rookie who didn't play, you know what I'm saying, to the guy that wasn't out here scoring 20 points, then that would probably rub you raw. But I meant Jimmy Butler as All-Star and treated him as such. So our relationship got off to a much better start compared to maybe some of my peers. But the Jimmy Butler you see now is the same exact player. He will try to take things on his shoulders late in games if it comes down to it. But Jimmy Butler was never a selfish player. You know, his thing about me trying to do it on my own, he never really tried to do that. He played on good teams with Derrick Rose. He played on the team with Dwayne Wade and Rajon Rondo. They called themselves the Three Alphas. He had a little bit of drama that year. But he was never a selfish player. Now the guy that you see now, Michael Holley, though, he's much more mature. The game is slowed down for him. He's much more secure in his place in the league. You know what I mean? Like, he's not fighting for turf. He's not fighting for real estate amongst the league's best. He's very secure. He knows that he belongs. And now he's almost out to prove that he should stay there at 33 years old and having all the mileage on his body. Remember when he first got to Miami and he left Philadelphia, people were saying, Jimmy Butler, he's going to retire in Miami. Like, almost kind of like he's not going to be able to compete. Remember Philly? Well, the Philly people were upset that he left, and they were like, oh, he's not trying to compete. He just wanted to go to Miami just to vacation.
Right.
And turns out he's been to 2 NBA finals, and I think Philly has probably won a total of 2 playoff series since then.
See, and you know, I want to ask you, because I want to just put this out there. I think I probably overstepped and I went a little too far. I said early in the playoffs.
You going too far?
Yeah,
really going
I went too far. I went too far. I know you're still upset about a little text chain we had when I mentioned the greatest player of all time. If you're not ready to deal with the greatest player of all time, Vinnie, I mean, you covered basketball long enough. You know basketball. I mean, you should just know who the best player in NBA history is. I shouldn't have to tell you who that is. I mean, I'm just surprised that you don't get it. But
are you done?
Earlier,
let me know when you're finished.
So earlier in these playoffs,
like
I said
we're doing
Miami,
Judge Judy.
Yeah. If Miami wins it, I said, Miami, I've never seen a team win with this amount of talent. And I said it dismissively, like, they'd be the least talented, one of the least talented champions. And that's not true. That's not true. I see them in a different way than I saw them just 2 weeks ago. Certain things just don't happen by accident, by luck, by coincidence. After a while, you keep doing the same stuff over and over, that's kind of who you are. This is not NCAA tournament. You're not going to get lucky and keep advancing. These are series, and you're winning series for a reason. These Miami Heat, in a lot of ways, remind me of the 2004 Detroit Pistons. They do. 2004 Pistons. As a matter of fact, I don't know. Are these Heat more talented? Are they more talented overall than the 2004 Pistons? Are they? I don't know. I know they got
that's a tough one.
How about their best, though? How about their best? Their best versus Detroit's best. If you say their best is, I don't know who Detroit's best was. I know who won Finals MVP, but was it Rasheed, was it Rip, or was it Chauncey as the best player on the 04 Pistons versus we know who the best player on the 2023 Miami Heat. We know who that player is. And then we start going down the line. I mean, what do you think?
Okay. I think as a talent, as a basketball talent, Rasheed Wallace probably trumps everything on both ends, right? Inside, outside scorer, hellacious defensive player. Now, Rasheed didn't bring it every night from a production standpoint, but as far as making all the pieces fit together, being a basketball genius, like Rasheed is probably the best basketball talent. Then maybe you go Jimmy, then you probably go Ben Wallace, considering the way that game was played back then, where he had to guard the interior players, but he was also adept enough to guard the guards. And then you go to Bam, and then you go to maybe Chauncey Billups. Like, I think the backcourt, assuming that Jimmy Butler's a front court player, the backcourt is where those 04 Pistons have an advantage. I don't even know if that's a great comparison. I think the 04 Pistons get underrated, and the story is told that
that's why.
There's no superstars.
Vinnie, I want you to keep going. I want you to keep going. But that's why the way they play is not similar. But it's like they're both they're underrated. Both of them are. Both of them are underrated. Now, one is a champion, and one still has 3 wins to get to a championship before we can start comparing them to championship teams. But the Miami Heat have been underrated throughout these playoffs. And if I'm not mistaken, outside of Michigan, the 04 Pistons were the same way. Every step. Didn't they play Indiana that year too in the playoffs?
Yeah.
So they were underrated then. They were underrated after game 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the NBA Finals before they finally won it in game 5. I don't know, man. I think that's where I see some similarity.
Okay, here's the difference. We'll end with the similarities, but we'll start with the differences. The differences were, you look at the Miami Heat roster, and I know they're tired of saying it, but the undrafted players, there's a lot of undrafted guys, from Duncan Robinson to Highsmith to Gabe Vincent to Max Strus, like all those guys undrafted. Up and down the roster on the 04 Pistons, Chauncey Billups, I think, was the 3rd pick in 97. Rip Hamilton, top 10 pick. Rasheed Wallace, top 5 pick. Tayshaun Prince was like 22 coming out of Kentucky as a 4-year college player, and Ben Wallace was undrafted. So it's a little bit different. Like, those players, to me, Holley, had a pedigree that it just didn't work in those other places. They had been cast off from other places, and the Pistons found money as far as trying to bring those guys together because they had been undervalued in other places. These Heat teams, like, it was almost like nobody wanted them. Like, they had no pedigree at all. You're undrafted. You're basically the league saying we don't want you. And those guys scrapped and clawed and fought their way. And that's where the similarities began. The similarities is that both teams were too damn stubborn. That Piston team lost a game 5 to the New Jersey Nets at home in double overtime. Remember the Chauncey Billups half-court shot to send the game into overtime? And, they lost that. Then they lost home court advantage against the Indiana Pacers 2 games after the Tayshaun Prince block, and they just kept coming back. They kept coming back. Yeah. They kept playing. The Pistons blew that game 2 against the Lakers with the Kobe Bryant shot to send the game in overtime when Larry Brown elected not to foul. Like, those Piston teams, not from just 04, but even for the next few years after that, they were just so damn stubborn. You know, they just refused to go down when you thought you had them down. This Heat team is very similar. You know, almost blew the Celtics series, right? Nearly blew that series, but could have won that series in 6 games if not for a miraculous bounce. So they have a remarkable ability, both teams, of being resilient and not giving a damn what you think of them. So even however this series plays out, I think you can put the Heat up there with one of the most resilient teams that we've seen in recent NBA history, win or lose. I think that's the similarity.
Yeah, and it's a great point. I mean, you think about it, I love that about Miami. Miami just keeps coming. They just keep coming. And Detroit was the same way. As a matter of fact, you know, Vinnie, some of my favorite teams, some of my favorite NBA teams kind of have that profile.
Go ahead and say it. No, you about to say some of your favorite teams is from Detroit. Go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it. You, the Ohioan, you know, you can, you know, like Rick James. I'm doing a Rick James. You know.
I can't say that's true. I can't say that's true. I can't say that some of my favorite. I can't say some of my favorite teams are from Detroit. I can't say some of my best friends are from Detroit. I can't say that. I can't. I'm sorry. No, but I'd say some of my favorite NBA teams, and this is why I want to bring this up real quick before we talk to Mark Spears in a little bit. Some of my favorite teams have that profile that worry executives. And worry executives in some way are like, wait a minute, will people watch this? Will people watch the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets because they're well-built teams, but they don't necessarily have a mega superstar? Or if they have the mega superstar, that superstar, he's got the talent to be considered ultra, but his personality is kind of understated. Well, people just be drawn to that. So 2004 Pistons, I loved it. I love watching them. 2011 Dallas Mavericks, they had Dirk and some other guys, some other good players, good reputations, but it was Dirk. And the 2014, maybe one of my top 5 teams, the 2014 San Antonio Spurs, young Kawhi, who don't say nothing, still don't say nothing. Tim Duncan, who had the big game, outsized game, personality, not so much. Nobody averaged 30 minutes a game. The guy who talked the most was their coach, Greg Popovich. I think this is good for the NBA. And Vinnie, damn it, basketball fans will watch it. Basketball fans will watch, despite this fear that they're just superficial star chasers. What say you?
Well, who's saying, the question I always have whenever people bring this up about ratings, I don't know why we care so much about ratings when we're watching anyway. You know what I mean? Like, we care.
I don't know. I kind of care about it.
No, I get it. But what I'm saying is, like, I feel like there's much more of a conversation about ratings than there should be. But the ratings have shown that people are going to watch it. The ratings have gone up. And every year, since the bubble, as the graphic is showing. And you got to think, last year, you had a dynastic Golden State team and a historic team in the Boston Celtics. And those numbers from last year aren't that dissimilar from the numbers this year. So it shows that people are going to watch, and all of the hand wringing, and if it's not Lakers and Celtics, or if it's not Celtics and whomever, nobody's going to watch. Tell me who those people are who aren't watching. Because clearly they are. And the Heat, theoretically, are positioned as this great foil. They would be a great opponent against one of these bigger market teams. And so with the Nuggets. But what both teams have done is create a narrative throughout these playoffs, craft a story that people feel familiar with and they want to see more of. No, the NBA did not necessarily market Nikola Jokic, and Nikola Jokic doesn't want to be marketed. The Denver Nuggets don't necessarily do the best job of marketing their players. Like, it is a trick that the Nuggets do on the world. They're like Kaiser Soze when they say nobody pays any attention to us. We don't want anybody to pay attention to us. And then when you start paying attention to them, they're like, no, keep your attention that way. You know, we don't get to know us, that sort of thing. But there is something that people are buying into with both franchises, whether it's Jokic and Heat culture, whatever it is. But it's a pretty compelling series so far, and I expect the numbers to go up as the series progresses.
That dynamic you explained, I hear that so many times. Don't you see it? Like it's almost like the music thing too. Like if you know of a musical group, hey, yeah, you know, I got this group. Nobody really pays attention to them. I like them. Then people start paying attention to them. Yeah, you paying attention to them now, but no, I knew them before they became popular. Or you don't really understand them. You're paying attention. Or you hear that from soccer fans too. Like every 4 years, it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again in 2026. Get ready. You know, World Cup's going to be here on North American soil. It's going to be here. And then we'll get a lecture and a rebuke from soccer fans. You guys don't really understand what you're watching. It's a beautiful game. It's the beautiful game. You don't understand what you're watching. Okay, we start talking about it. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, we're paying attention, but you weren't paying attention 4 years ago. What do you want from me? You want respect, you don't want respect. You want me to pay attention, you don't want me to pay attention. What the hell do you want? Denver Nuggets, they want the respect. They just don't want to admit it. Anyway, Vinnie, last thing before we get to Marc Spears. Are you out of the prediction game in the NBA Finals? Because I'm out. No more predictions. I'm just going to sit back and watch it. I have no idea what's going to happen in Game 3. Miami can win by 20. They can lose by 40. They can go to double overtime, triple overtime. I have no idea. Miami might win the series. I don't know. How about you?
Here's my prediction for tonight. I did predict that Miami would get a split, but I thought the split would happen winning Game 1, losing Game 2. Here's my prediction for tonight. It will either be a Miami close win or a Denver blowout. That'll be what it is.
Okay.
That's a prediction, right? That's a prediction, right?
That's a prediction. Either a Miami close win, 102 to 100, or a Nuggets blowout, 127 to 94. Okay.
It won't be that.
Right.
It won't be that bad. But I think the Nuggets will get up 110 points. Either way, I think they're going to score.
All right. Okay. Good to know. I wonder what the Hall of Famer thinks. The one and only Marc Spears joins Brother from Another when we come back. Marc Spears. All right, the latest from Marc Spears, the Hall of Fame writer from Anscape, ESPN, writing about Kyle Lowry. Lowry says, when you care about winning, it's easy. So Lowry's got a big contract, but not a starter now for these Miami Heat. Comes off the bench at times, coming off the bench and watching Gabe Vincent play over him. But that doesn't matter to him. And maybe, Mark, that's part of the magic that I was talking about with Vinnie earlier with the Miami Heat. Part of the reason they're there, and most people outside of South Florida say, what the hell are they doing here? Maybe that's part of the reason. Is that part of the reason, that attitude that Kyle Lowry is explaining to you?
Well, yeah, Steve Kerr talked about it the other day, the Warriors head coach on Draymond Green's podcast, is that, you know, these guys care about winning and whatever role they need to win. And that's such as often the case with championship teams. I mean, even if you look at the Denver side, like I keep mentioning, like, man, Reggie Jackson hasn't played yet. Like, I think Reggie Jackson's a pretty good ball player. He and DeAndre Jordan's chilling like me and Vinnie are at the games, right? Like, but they've certainly accepted their role. I've never seen Reggie complain. And, you know, Kyle Lowry, who's he's a 5-time All-Star, somebody who's, you know, won a championship. I like kind of really looked him in the eye, and, you know, he certainly had reason to be diva. And I looked for that diva, and he's like, Pat Riley kind of gave him a hint about it. And he's like, all right. He walked outside and it was sunny and he went home. Like, he just accepted his role and his pay don't change. Right. So,
right.
And then we forget that he's 37 years old. And I think he realizes too that he told me he actually likes coming off the bench so much now, and I believe it ended like nearly a 600 game starting streak, that when he did have to start in game 5 against the Celtics, he felt out of whack. He wasn't comfortable anymore. So he's really given in to, being a starter, not being a starter anymore. And he's continuing to be a mentor and showing you like what Miami has. They have true professionals.
Before we go to my next question, let's appreciate Marc Spears and his setup in Miami. That looks like a beautiful, beautiful place, Marc Spears. You always happen to pick out the best hotels, the best setups. Like y'all don't realize that Marc Spears, picks out the best restaurants, has the best wine selections, and also picks out the best hotels on the road. He is a one-man concierge. All right.
Hey man, I don't know about the best hotels, but I guess shout out to Marriott, right? Because we all we might as well get Marriott tattoos, all the Marriott points we try to accumulate and everything. I mean, they should give us a nice room. All the time I spent like a third of my life at a Marriott hotel. So but the Bay Area thing is where the wine comes from, man. That's just what we do.
Yeah, that's definitely a Marc Spears production. So I was going to ask you about the Steve Kerr thing, because I felt like Steve Kerr was shooting some subliminal shots at his own team when he was talking on Draymond's podcast and talking about the gender basketball. You know what I mean? I felt like that was a shot at Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga. It's real easy for a coach to take shots at players when those players ain't got paid yet. I felt like that was a little bit below the belt. You know what I mean? Like Kuminga and Moses Moody, and you're trying to compare them to the veteran Miami Heat team. Duncan Robinson got paid. Kyle Lowry got paid. We know Gabe Vincent is going to get paid this offseason. So all those guys are incentivized to play the way that they're playing. I felt like I won't say unfair, but it was definitely, you could put some ether in the background of what Steve Kerr was saying when he was talking to Draymond Green.
Yeah, but he didn't say their names. And you know what? Why do we have to baby everybody? Right? Steve's trying to win a championship. So, I mean, if that's what they need to do to win, I mean, I understand these guys are young guys and they're both super talented. I'm still a little confused as to why Kuminga didn't play. But when it comes to the playoffs, man, like, there's a reason why Miami's playing. Miami's an 8 seed. They shouldn't be there. But they really have like a togetherness, a team bond. And I do think that regardless to whether Steve was, look in between the lines or not, like I think there's just to that, there was a lot of pouting in the locker room. There was a lot of disappointment in the locker room from those guys. And I mean, I get it, but when you're on this level, man, like it can't be about you. And I think if you ask the people covering the Warriors who are around the team on a regular basis, they probably applauded Steve for saying that, whether he meant it or not, as a shot at those young guys. And I like them both. They're both great people, very talented, right? Futures ahead. But when it comes to playoff time, when it comes to winning, man, like I was talking about Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson has a lot to complain about, But Reggie's trying to win a championship, and he put his ego aside for the betterment of the team.
I know you used to cover the
Nuggets. Jordan Poole's been paid. Jordan Poole got his money.
Oh, yeah, Jordan paid. Oh, yeah, he got paid. That money's coming. Coming this year, right?
He was just bad. That's what that was. He was just bad.
Yeah. I know you used to cover the Nuggets and didn't make it to the NBA Finals then. They weren't that kind of team. They were good, but not like this.
Melo's Nuggets. Nick Van Exel's Nuggets.
What's the biggest thing they need to do in Game 3? Because I really felt like through one game and 3 quarters, I'm like, man, they about to go up 2-0. They're looking pretty good. Now here we are at 1-1. What's the biggest thing they need to do to get back to like their true selves?
I think they need to play 48 minutes of consistent basketball with their foot to the pedal. In the fourth quarter in Game 1, I felt like the Nuggets let their foot off and almost let Miami back in the game. they had this amazing, Vinnie, what was it, 42-10 run in game 2?
Yeah, something like
like
that.
You're not supposed to lose a game like that. And then they relaxed again. And Miami plays every possession as if their like loved ones' lives depend on it. So I do think if the Nuggets can learn something from the first 2 games, like, hey man, this is 1st to 4. This isn't the regular season. There has to be a sense of urgency here. Like every play matters. And I don't think they kind of almost, I don't know if they're feeling themselves too much, but their disappearing act in times at games are, cost them a victory. And I'm sure that Michael Malone has shook them on this and that there will be much more focus from beginning to end. Because if they don't have that focus, man, Miami Heat, boy, as UD told me after the last game, he said, we a bunch of dogs, man. We a bunch of dogs. They're not going to lay down. They're not going to go away. So they're kind of like being that heavyweight fight against their former champ. You gotta knock them out. That's what it's going to take to beat Miami.
You do. And the crazy thing for me, Mark, is that Miami plays as consistent to their character as any team. Like their ceiling may not be as high as Boston or Milwaukee's or even Denver's now, but you beat Milwaukee and you beat Boston. So I feel like there's a consistency in how they show up night to night that other teams can't necessarily match. Now, to spin this forward, Nikola Jokic had a huge scoring game in game 2, scored over 40. But with the exception of a couple of plays, Mark, they shut down the passing angles. They shut down everybody else getting off. So do you look at game 3 tonight and say, is this going to be a Jamal Murray game where he has to facilitate a lot more? Or do you think that Michael Malone has to switch something up to turn Jokic back into a 3-dimensional player, not necessarily just a 40-point scorer? Because Miami feels real comfortable letting him score a tough 40 or an easy 40. I think it was like 16-28, but hardly anybody else was able to really get into an offensive rhythm.
Yeah, no, the beauty of the finals is it's a chess match, right? Like, you really get to see how great these coaches are. And Spoelstra's move to put Kevin Love in the starting lineup was fantastic. And actually, after the game, he was sounding like he was kicking himself for not doing that at the beginning. So, Michael Malone is great as well. I expect him to make some kind of adjustment. But you got to remember, this is all new territory for Denver too. Like think about this, like Miami's been in the finals 7 times since 2006. But tonight is the first road finals game in Nuggets history. It's the first one.
Wow.
So this is like all new territory for them. I heard they flew their families out. So, that certainly, hopefully is not a distraction, but it could be. Remember Avery Johnson and the Mavericks in 2006? It wasn't a family situation. It was in the club situation then, where they actually changed hotel rooms in the middle of the finals. So Miami certainly has its distractions, to say the least. So I'm really interested to see how the Nuggets come out, but also they did have a good bonding moment, I guess, the first night here where Jeff Green invited them to his house out in Miami, and got them some, home cooking from a great chef and kind of relax their minds. So I'm really, really curious. I mean, let's be honest, Miami isn't exactly playing like in the Coliseum in Rome or nothing like that. It's not an intimidating place, but it's still on the road. This is new, and I'm curious to see what kind of focus they have tonight.
You know what? I'm so jealous of both of you for just being there right now. I love the NBA Finals, man, because it's the postseason. It's the postseason plus, because in the postseason you find out really what somebody is made of. You start to find it out. But in the finals, especially after 2 games, that's why I put in the feed, what kind of 1-1 series will this become? After 2 games, you've seen some incredible things over the years. Just think about it. After 2 games of the 06 finals, we thought the Dallas Mavericks were about to win a championship, and Dwayne Wade was overwhelmed. Oops. Yeah. Dwayne Wade went to another level. 2 games, a couple years ago, we thought Phoenix had Milwaukee's number. Giannis, a hurt Giannis improves in the NBA Finals, cap it off with that 50-point piece in Game 6. What kind of series? I want both of y'all to answer this. What kind of series, what kind of surprises? Somebody's going to rise up even more. Somebody's got another gear in them. What kind of series we got coming here in the next 3, 4, maybe 5 games?
Well, I'll say this. Shout out to Mr. Tom Joyner, the fly jock. Vinnie got to meet him the other day.
I saw
Amazing
that picture.
Man. Yeah, Vinnie got to meet him.
Yeah.
I did a story on him, and he asked me to sit courtside with him for the story tonight. Jimmy had 56. I mean, like, probably the most amazing individual performance I've seen covering the NBA. And I expect Jimmy to put that cape on. Like, he had this swag walking out. I'm going to still call it Pepsi Center. Mama called it Pepsi Center. I'm going to call it Pepsi Center. Walking out the Pepsi Center the other day, wearing that T-shirt that said 3 more. Like Jimmy's just, the only thing missing for him is a championship, right? I'm enjoying his commercials. I'm enjoying his, I need to taste his coffee. Like, I'm enjoying his off-the-court swag. And all he needs to finish this up with is a top it up with a championship. And it's sitting there for him. So I'm looking forward to see, now that he's 3 wins away, Bam's playing well. Jimmy hasn't had a signature moment yet. I feel like that's coming. I feel like we're in the midst on something special from Jimmy in this finals.
That's not a bad prediction. And here's what I'll say, because y'all know I have the analogies, so I'm gonna bring the analogies here. For the first 2 games of the finals, it feels like the courting phase, where you just meeting somebody, you're introducing your best self to them. You know what I mean? Like, you ain't really being your full self. You are being your representative in the first 2 games of the finals. Then by the time we get to Game 4, then you're like, all right, am I gonna brush my hair today? You know what I mean? Am I gonna be who I am? Me
and Holley we're a few years removed from this analogy, especially Holley. But go ahead.
But I'm appreciating it though. I'm appreciating it. The little stubble I have is standing up and applauding right now. It's applauding the analogy. But go ahead.
Yeah, as a single man, I can make these analogies without really having to worry about much big thing. You know what I mean? But I will say that's where the first 2 games of the finals are. Game 3, you start seeing the real, right? You start figuring out, do I want to dance with this dude again? That sort of thing. You know what I mean? Do I want to dance with this woman again? That's where we at. So with that being said, I like the Jimmy Butler analogy. If Jimmy Butler was healthy, I think Jimmy Butler's more hurt than he's letting on. I think that he's masking that ankle injury that he suffered against Game 1 against New York. I don't know how able he is to rev it up to get to that 40, 50 point, plateau that he did against the Milwaukee Bucks. And he insists that he's not a scorer. So what I'm going to look for tonight is to see if these Miami Heat shooters will still keep that hot streak on. Because the last couple of home games that they've had, remember Game 4 against Boston, couldn't hit anything. Game 6 against Boston, they were better, but they missed a few critical shots that could have ended this series and put everybody out of its misery. But, they decided to go to Boston and get Boston all revved up and get their mouth water for some hash, and they ain't had no hash, and get them revved up for some orange juice, and all they had was a swallow. You know what I mean? And well.
Hey man, we need to put you on a pulpit, man. You need to be on a pulpit.
Go ahead.
I ain't no preacher.
Preach, Reverend.
I ain't no preacher.
Reverend Vinnie. Reverend Goodwill.
Don't do that. I got enough nicknames that don't apply as is. So what I'm looking for tonight is to see if these Heat shooters bring it, and to see if Denver actually responds to adversity. This is their first time having, to really have their backs to the wall, to really have to respond, and to have their coach call them out. Let's see how real they are.
I mean, they were 2-2 against the Suns, so they did have some adversity there. And I did think the Suns were going to respond after that, and then they beat them up after that. But that's about it, Vinnie, as you were mentioning. That's pretty much all the adversity that they've had. They've been relatively healthy. So, really, if you think about it, they lost home court. That's huge, man. So not only is it's tied, but they're really behind a little bit because they did lose home court. and Miami got some confidence. Like that's where I think they're probably kicking themselves is they had the game in hand. They had a nice lead, and they took their foot off the gas. I feel like this is like a tortoise and the hare kind of finals, right? And maybe if the Nuggets do end up losing this thing, this is where the inexperience and the youth kick in. It's a situation like this. Like, remember, like kind of like when the Heat lost with LeBron, right? Like to Dallas. That Heat team was the better team, but that veteran Dallas team just kept chipping away and figured it out. And so, like Denver better stop playing with fire with these guys, because the Heat ain't no joke, man. And that's not play on words. Like I wouldn't toy with these guys too much. I wouldn't give up games like I feel like they gave up in game 2.
But I just say, and before I ask y'all the last thing, I just want to say, maybe some of these teams are going to say to you, Mark Spears, and you, Vinnie Goodwill, and me, hey, y'all, by the way, we ain't playing around. They're doing this to us. We don't have mentality problems. They are the Miami Heat. If you get into the ring with these dudes, hey, they got a left.
That's what the Heat players might be saying to the screen right now. Listening to this.
They got an uppercut. They got an uppercut that's nasty. They're physical. They're disciplined. Y'all think we playing around? No, we ain't playing. It's impossible that they ain't playing around. They're just playing a team that's just really good, and we don't understand why they're good now. They weren't good.
Did you guys think that the Nuggets are?
Why are they good now?
You think the Nuggets are missing? This is where I think, and I'm not. This is where I wish like Reggie Jackson would get some playing time for him. I remember during the Kobe Shaq years, as great as they were, they used a Ron Harper, they used a Brian Shaw to get them to the finish line. Use a veteran guy. Like, as great as those two guys were, they needed that veteran presence to get them over the hump and get them to the finish line. And that's where maybe a Reggie Jackson, is it too late now? I don't know. But having a veteran presence at the guard position, I think could be very, very helpful, instead of guys who are so conditioned to put shots up that they don't think about massaging the clock. They don't think about perhaps trying to figure out the easy bucket to when I covered the Celtics and they won, I called Paul Pierce Dennis Eckersley. I never covered anybody that was better at getting a save, at getting it. And Holley, you remember this? Like, he was just amazing at it, massaging the clock, either hitting a little short range, small jumper, or getting fouled, or getting Ray Allen the ball, or getting KG the ball. He closed games, and I think the Nuggets are in dire need of that veteran that could get the save for them. That's my baseball analogy, Vinny.
I like that.
There you go, Mark. I like it.
Dennis Eckersley, Mariano Rivera, just your closers. Those are two of the best. I don't think you can get better than that.
No.
Sorry, Lee Smith.
Oh, we can put Lee Smith in there. We can put Lee Smith in there. He was nice.
No. Nah, not with Rivera. Not with Eck. Nah.
All right.
Come on.
You said it.
All right, Mark.
All right, fellas. Love y'all. Peace.
I recognize everything that I've said in the past and in my prior positions. I recognize that people are going to call me a hypocrite. And anytime I've said anything, I said it with the information I had at that moment, and I said it based on someone that's trying to compete for the PGA Tour and our players. And so I accept those criticisms, but circumstances do change, and I think that, in looking at the big picture and looking at it this way, that's what got us to this point.
It was contentious. There were many moments where certain players were calling for new leadership of the PGA Tour and even got a couple standing ovations. I think the most powerful moment was when a player quoted Commissioner Monahan from the 3M in Minnesota last year when he said, as long as I'm commissioner of the PGA Tour, no player that took LIV money will ever play the PGA Tour again. And, it just seems like a lot of backtracking. I think as we step away from this and see it unfold in the coming weeks, I think we'll get more clarity. But there was a lot of anger in that room from players, that feeling like they can't trust what the leadership of the PGA Tour says anymore.
Oh, we talked about this yesterday. I'm telling you, Doug Smith, I expected, look, if you said, hey, this is going to happen, give me like 10 surprising stories that would shock you. I wouldn't have predicted this one, the PGA Tour, DP, and LIV Tour all coming together under one big happy umbrella, family umbrella. I didn't see this happening. What was your take? I'm still shocked by it. Are you as shocked as I am, or did you have any hints that something like this was afoot?
Well, number one, appreciate y'all having me on here today. And this has been the craziest 2 days in golf, I think, in the history of the sport, honestly. And we go back to yesterday, the initial reaction just from the news, it seemed and felt like it happened under the cloak of darkness that, I'm out here on the West Coast, Mike. And so I woke up about, hearing the news at about 6:45 local time. It already kind of broke there on the East Coast. And shock as it relates to the news and how the day started, that's kind of what shocked me. But when we look at how fractured golf has been, something had to be done. And it's probably the only time that I've ever agreed with anything Donald Trump has said. But years ago, he called it. He said, hey, probably going to come together at some point. And that's kind of my take.
So, didn't expect to hear Donald Trump's name brought up today.
Yeah, go ahead, Vinnie. Go ahead.
No. My first thought that I had, and someone that I was with last night in Miami brought this up. My thought is, if you're Tiger Woods, if you're Rory McIlroy, and you turn down money from the Saudis, how do you reconcile that now? Do you get some back? You know what I mean? Do you get something extra on the side for this deal? Because Phil is over there raking in the cash, and now Phil gets to come back home and get off and keep all his money. So if you're Tiger, if you're some of those bigger names that turn down LIV, how do you reconcile this now?
Well, I think when we look back at the initial decision, it was, are you going to go play on this alternate tour for just a big bag of money, right? And then a lot of guys chose to stay on the PGA Tour side of this dynamic or this dichotomy. So very valid question. I think that's something that we're going to see play out throughout the next and coming days, because look, Jay Monahan's announcement didn't give a lot of information as to the hows. How are we going to do this? Is LIV going to stay a thing? Are we going to incorporate team golf into the PGA Tour? How does this look? As of today, we don't know. But I will say this, if I'm, rumor circle for John Rahm around 400 million, 300 million for Hideki Matsuyama, and if they didn't take the bag and stay with the PGA Tour, it's going to be some pissed off individuals. And that's going to be something and a conversation that Jay Monahan and the policy board of the PGA Tour are going to have to answer to a lot of players, pretty much most of the players in the top 20.
Can Jay Monahan continue in his current position with these guys? Obviously, he can continue because he comes out of this, from a financial standpoint, he's still the man we hear from. All these formerly competing entities have now come together, and what voice are we hearing? Jay Monahan's. So it's been good for him financially, but the players, you saw these reports of players mad, call him a hypocrite. Oh, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Can he continue with credibility in this position?
Look, I think Jay Monahan. Well, let's go back. Let's talk a little bit about Jay, because golf was the first sport to come back through COVID. He took criticisms then and then got his flowers, right? So Jay kind of spearheaded making sure that these players had a place to play and that the sport was being seen during one of the most tremendous growth periods in our sport, in this game of golf. Golf boomed, and it boomed mostly around girls 8 to 12, black girls. That's who really kind of picked up the game as far as the kind of the disenfranchised group that came in during COVID. So let's applaud Jay Monahan for the foresight that he had to bring the sport back through one of the most tumultuous times in our nation. Fast forward to what we now know about this merger. I'll say this: Jay he's gonna be called every name that you can be called under the sun, Mike, Vinnie. I'm telling you, he's gonna be called everything. And you know what? He took the argument to the RBC Heritage yesterday, talked to the players there in the player meeting at 4:00 Eastern time. And from what I've heard, and we heard Johnson Wagner just talk about it, our colleague over at Golf Channel, he said that it was a tense space where people were calling for Jay Monahan's head. I will say this: if people just take a moment to take a step back and remove some of the politics from this, or the morality of this whole thing that golf has kind of stood on over the last 2 years, what you're going to see down the line is a better funded PGA Tour, higher payouts in the fields. And you know what? There's going to be better retirement for the guys that are going to play on the PGA Tour, ultimately going to the Champions Tour. So there will be some good to come, but it's not going to be tomorrow. And Jay Monahan, they're going to call for his head. But what I can say from what I've seen thus far is Jay Monahan's not acting for the good news tomorrow. He's acting for the good news, or the gospel, coming down the line for the PGA Tour in 5 to 10 years.
Will he be there for it, though? When the good news comes, he going to be around for it? Or is he going to be watching?
That's above my pay grade right there to call, Mike. But I will say, I do believe that there's a lot of information that we don't know. So it's really kind of hard to kind of speculate. I mean, we're just over 24 hours from this entire kind of news breaking, and it caught everybody by storm. Every single person, players, fans, the leagues themselves, even Greg Norman, surprised yesterday.
And that, it's funny. That was going to be my question, Doug. Are you surprised that the announcement of the deal came out, but no real details? That I almost felt like, because it came out so hastily and almost sloppily, you could maybe win the PR battle if you have every detail as far as how it's going to affect players, how it's going to affect the current tourney system, that you would have answered a lot of questions and soothed a lot of concerns. But we have nothing so far. So are you surprised that we have nothing other than the announcement of the merger?
I am a bit surprised because, everybody wants to know. I mean, we live in a me society. So how does this affect me? As a PGA Tour broadcaster, how does this affect me? The players are asking the same thing. The players that didn't take the money, they want to know, how does this affect them? Am I surprised by the lack of information? A little bit. But when you have something at this magnitude that happens so quickly, some of the other motivations are things that I'm kind of trying to figure out. How did we get this announcement so sudden and abrupt? Those are more the questions that I have in this moment. I think as we pay attention to this story over the next 30 to 60, 90 days, I think we'll get those answers. But I feel, though, honestly, that this is a celebratory moment for the PGA Tour. I think everybody's going to be pissed off at Jay Monahan. He's going to take a lot of criticism. But when we pull back that lens and look at what this can do, I really believe that Jay Monahan has now put himself in a position to lead how this money is going to grow the game moving forward. So I don't see it being that big of an issue. But Mike, to your point, is he going to have a job? If it's up to the players right now, I say no, but I think cooler heads will prevail as the story continues to unfold.
He went in too hard, man. He went in too hard. Like it was just this time last year. Hey, listen, I have family members, and I don't have to apologize for being on the PGA Tour. Like, he made it about, he's the one who made it about morality. That's what, like, if he had just kept his mouth shut, maybe the players would say, what are you doing? But they wouldn't be able, it's so easy just to pull that clip out, say, this is what you said then. How's it different? Now, man, hey, Doug, now his change is a little strange, man. His tie is askew, suit too big. He got the sleeves coming down here on his shirt. I mean, he all frazzled, hair's messed up. Come on, man. You started this whole thing. Anyway, Doug, we appreciate the time, man. And look, you got to come back. You got to come back and just kick it.
I'm here. I'm here.
It don't necessarily have to be a golf topic.
Hey, you got my number. You got my number. We don't have to talk through producers and PR folk. We can talk to each other directly. Just holler at me, man. I'm right here.
Okay, right here. None of this.
I'm right here. Whatever you need me, it's done.
All right. Appreciate you.
Always, man.
Doug Smith,
always.
Check him out.
Thanks, Doug.
Everybody keeps saying Damian Lillard is going to be traded to the Knicks. Damian Lillard's going to be traded to the Heat. Damian Lillard should be traded to the Celtics. Damian Lillard's going to be traded to the Nets. If one of those trades went through out of those teams, which one would you be like, that's not too bad?
Miami, obviously. Miami is the obvious one. And Bam is my dog. Bam is my dog for real. But I mean, I think Miami the obvious one. Brooklyn is obvious one. Is another obvious one because Mikal Bridges is my dog too. So I mean, and both are capable, have capable rosters. So.
Vinnie Goodwill, what's this all about? What's going on here? What's your read on this? Bam just talking so, I mean, not Bam. Dame just talking so casually about this. What's up?
Ain't this what we wanted? Haven't we tried to campaign? Not me, but haven't we as a sports media campaign to get poor Damian Lillard out of his dire straits in Portland? And now if he's leaning into it or just playing around with it, I don't have a huge problem with it, but you understand what he's doing.
No,
he's
I don't have a problem with
to
it.
The machine.
But do you think it's just a little more than hypothetical? Do you think this is something he's thought about and wants to make happen?
Unless he says he wants out. He knows that the only way that he's going to get really traded is if he asks for it. And we know that the Portland Trail Blazers don't have necessarily the gumption to do what's best for the franchise if that means trading Damian Lillard. That's what that means.
Yeah. Said obvious. Said the obvious one is Miami. Miami's like, we're trying to win a championship. We ain't thinking about Dame. Not right now. Enjoy the game, Vinnie. See y'all later.
Yes, sir.
Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget, you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.